A lot is quite happening in the eastern part of Africa, Rwanda, DRC, M23. These are very key names that keep coming up in our news bulletins or news cycles virtually every week. Joining me actually in the studio to speak more on the issue and other issues is Ambassador Haruna Warkani. He's a former diplomat, but actually prefers to be called a documentalist. So good afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Afternoon, Chiamaka. Good evening, viewers.
Okay, so let's take a look now. You see, the United States sanctioned the state minister for James Kabarabe because of this issue, saying that he's acted as some liaison for M23 rebels. Now, UK has suspended aid, and Rwanda is denying it. There are other issues happening. First of all, what's the stake of Rwanda in the DRC? Before we start going to if they're involved at all, what would be a reason for them to even think about getting involved?
Well, Rwanda and DRC, Burundi just nearby, Uganda and Kenya, within that enclave in east and southern parts of Africa generally, we would say, are like countries with the same umbilical cord. Now, because of colonialism, these countries have been segregated by artificial boundaries. So today we are up to a scenario where Africa is more or less like trying to reverse an injustice committed in 1884 in Berlin by the criminal border adjustments that were made to carve out states irrationally without any good reason, and therefore you ended up with a scenario where you have the same people, the same ethnic nationalities in three different countries. Now, Rwanda is saying she is in a defensive position because the M23 rebels, as they are called, are people of Rwandan origin who happens to be in the DRC side of the border. And agreements were signed, which was on that May 23, and that's why they are called M23. So, having adopted that name and the processes that led to that agreement, for them they stand on that agreement, and those agreements gave them like a recognition for self-determination within that enclave, because a lot of them had to flee Rwanda in the 1994 genocide. So now you have a very complex situation where Rwanda is very uncomfortable that these people might cross over to its border any moment and create more havoc, rekindling what happened in 1994.
Okay.
DRC is happy in a way that a country nearby can also be destabilized because it's feeling uncomfortable with the M23 within its enclave. That's why you see that the M23 has garnered a lot of support within that Kivu region and have overtaken some of these regional capitals like Goma and the rest of them. Now, it's becoming very complex for Rwanda to just sit by and do nothing. The accusation, therefore, that Rwanda is busy supporting the M23 rebels could be the truth, but very difficult to accept because nations normally, for national security and sovereignty issues, might hide under certain circumstances to say this is not so, this is so. But surely, Rwanda cannot continue to deny that they are in support of the M23.
Okay. Right now, so when you started your responding, you said something about the fact that the M23 people are actually Rwandans, if I get you correctly. So why can't Rwanda accept their own people back?
Well, you see, if you go back to the 1990 genocide, you will see that the sharp division between the Hutus and the Tutsis were the prime moving force why that genocide occurred. Today, you have people who are now in charge, and those who fled Rwanda are essentially the M23.
Okay.
Rwanda cannot just say come back because there was a problem. And so it is better for them to stay there and continue.
But if Rwanda is talking about they've gone through series of for lack of a better word to use, to try to get people to come back together, restitution and reconciliation between the Hutus and the Tutsis, then why is this a problem?
Restitution, reconciliation, rehabilitation, reintegration, etc., as keywords, are not necessarily an end to itself, because the safety of Rwanda as constituted today is what is paramount in the minds of the leaders over there. So we must not lose sight of the fact that I said Rwanda is in a defensive mode. They are just defending their national interest. And so whatever they do to get their rights and ensure stability and tranquility in their country, they are going to do it. That's what is going on. And I think the relationship between DRC and Rwanda might continue to be what it is, what we are seeing today, until such a time that perhaps either the DRC splits and the M23 have an enclave they can call maybe a country of their own.
Why does the DRC have to split? I would think, because I'm thinking about this, we could just carve out a place for Rwanda, carve out a place in the DRC and say, can you guys just go there, let's have peace.
Amaka, it doesn't work that easy, because taking away and splitting sovereignties and what have you, I mean, it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yes, of course.
Good. So there are a lot of complexities. The domestic politics, localized politics within that enclave is even much more. Besides the M23, there are still some groups that are either in support or in opposition to the M23's ideals of creating an enclave of their own. And we must not forget that Burundi is just by the side. A lot of things are also happening. And you see, these countries, Rwanda, Burundi, obviously are too small to have been countries that you can expect the kind of stability that is required for some of these countries. And now you are having this problem propping up. Rwanda is definitely distracted because, sure, the trajectory which it has maintained for some time of development has been halted.
Yes.
And the issues in the DRC are too complex. DRC has almost become like an ungoverned space. And so the government cannot even maintain law and order in that area. Now, we must not also forget that United Nations has taken that region of Kivu and the rest of them, Goma, etc., as almost a trusteeship. They have been there for so long to keep the peace. Unfortunately, they got sucked into the peace process that they became totally irrelevant. In fact, became a problem and became so weak that the M23 could overrun their bases, collect their weapons, collect their tanks and what have you, and now say they should leave. United Nations had no choice but to review its operational models within that enclave. So you have problems that are much more than what we see on the surface. And the accusations against Paul Kagame particularly would continue. You remember the African Union just met in a summit meeting and cannot resolve this matter. Ordinarily, one would have expected that the African Union should have by now deployed more forces than it is presently pretending to be, let me say pretending, because largely the forces are made of Kenyans. And there are some other issues, for lack of time, we might not be able to delve into it. Those are the issues I'm saying, the complexities of what is going on, because the Kenyans are also involved. South Africa is involved. So you see, a lot of countries are involved within the DRC. That's why I said DRC surely runs the risk of a split, because the government in Kinshasa is unable to extend authority over the entire region of the DRC. The international involvement has become also so intense because of the mineral resources and other considerations, such that what you see being discussed at the United Nations and some other agencies is different from what is going on the field in the DRC. And so DRC will be like a huge laboratory for all of us in Africa, that these are one of the things we have to deal with as a result of very bad border demarcations that were enacted in Berlin in 1884.
Okay.
Imposed on Africa with no input from Africa itself. So whatever you do today, the African Union needed to have been having a better show than what it is. And you see, when countries eventually split because of lack of governance, lack of assistance and what have you from Africa within, you begin to blame some leaders.
Okay. All right. I can see that you have so much to say about this. So just before we go, let's before we leave this conversation, let's talk about the sanctions, the UK-US sanctions on Rwanda. How is this going to impact them?
Well, sanctions conceptually have always been against the poor. They don't work for the government or against the government successfully as intended. No sanctions ever in the history of sanctions imposed by any country that has successfully worked, because besides the fact that sanctions can easily be busted, sanctions by their nature are so difficult to impose. Sanctions, sometimes when you impose them, yes, it could restrict activities of government, but the ultimate beneficiaries of government activities are supposed to be the poor. So you end up punishing the poor, not solving the problem. And so you end up, you are neither achieving what you intended to, but you have succeeded in creating problem more for both yourself and the sanctioned country. The sanctions imposed by UK on Rwanda, supported by America and the rest of them, you can see how fragile some of this so-called cozy relationship between Africa and the Western world. Some months ago, Rwanda was the darling of the UK. They were
willing to put asylum people, over there.
They wanted the Rwanda to accept asylum seekers in the UK that they cannot accommodate. I mean, it's so offensive that people came to your country, you can't host them, and you now looked for a refugee,
to just dump them.
A refugee camp. Let me put it, a refugee camp. You converted Rwanda to a refugee camp, and went behind Rwanda, discussed and cajoled Rwanda into accepting to say, okay, yeah, we can take some, which means as of that time, Rishi Sunak was like regarding Paul Kagame as the best leader on African continent. Good. And now suddenly the same UK has turned around to say we are imposing sanctions on Rwanda, the same Rwanda. I mean, how do you justify? So this should give African leaders a kind of warning that this so-called relationship that we do have with the Western world is fake. It's not real. It's not real. And we need to take it that whatever it is our fate taken by ourselves as Africans that matters at the end of the day, not what we do for and on behalf of the Western countries.
Okay. All right, we're going to be going on a short break, and when we return, we'll be looking at happenings here in west part of Africa. To stay with us. Welcome back. It's still Africa Update, reaching you from Abuja on Trust TV. Now, one of the stories this week was the Air Marshal of Nigeria, Hassan Abubakar, saying, warning that the exit of the Sahel states, that is Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, from ECOWAS has weakened regional security cooperation, increasing Nigeria's military burden. Now, it says the exit disrupts the multinational joint task force (MNJTF), affecting efforts against Boko Haram and ISWAP. Chad's potential withdrawal could further weaken joint operations. We've seen quite a lot of withdrawals and people making exits happening in recent times. Now, you heard what the Air Marshal has had to say at that meeting. What's your take?
Well, very unfortunate for Nigeria. Following all these processes that began sometimes last year, thereabout, you can see that the fallout of this decision for the AES to exit ECOWAS has costs and implications. And we are beginning to harvest some of these costs and implications. Normally, the multinational joint task force created a platform that indeed benefited Nigeria a lot, because we were able to use these other countries' resources, knowledge, intelligence, and the rest of them for the fight against Boko Haram. Unfortunately, when these countries exited, you could clearly see that a large chunk of that security architecture has gone. Two, we had like a free flow of flight rights across these countries. And so you do not need to even go and ask for bilateral agreement to overfly their airspace and the rest of them without whatever. They also acted as buffer for Nigeria in particular. From the influx from North Africa, Libya, Algeria, Mauritania, etc. Now those ones are gone. And we are creating more problem by being apart. But unfortunately, it's something that Nigeria alone cannot sit and take that decision. So the lamentations of the Air Force chief is real. The Air Force might have to do much more than they were doing before, spend much more. There must be some detours for flights, security flights around these countries to enable you to do certain things. And that's the danger that we said sometimes ago, that, look, don't allow countries like Togo and Benin to also join the AES, because the moment that happens, ECOWAS would have been divided into two, geographically, physically, economically, and politically, and that would have meant so much more for us. So yes, Nigeria needs to do much more to bolster a relationship. I think there must be a layer of understanding between Nigeria and some of these countries. It might not be necessarily official, but we have to still find a way to maintain a kind of ongoing relationship to enable us continue to contain Boko Haram and other insurgents within the sub-region. Don't forget, Chad was very angry with Nigeria that apparently it looks like Nigeria is supporting the Boko Haram. It's an allegation, but a very severe one. And Chad asking France, for instance, to dismantle its military bases and leave the country had also created another opportunity for the country to show that there is something wrong in our relationship or emerging relationship with France in particular. So all these are complex issues that, yes, the Air Force needs to be worried, because it costs more if you don't have good neighbors. And Nigeria needs these neighbors sincerely to be able to contain this insurgency, because Cameroon on this side, Chad on the northeast far, Niger on the other side, if they are not with us, we stand alone. And surprisingly, they are all Francophone countries. So they have security implications for us much more than if we are together. And therefore, we could see the frustration from the Air Force chiefs, because really the sub-region becomes vulnerable if we don't cooperate.
Okay. Okay, now, so we've been talking about, these issues now. So what can ECOWAS and Nigeria, because you've actually helped us understand the seriousness of the situation, especially for us, Nigeria. What can we do to mitigate the security vacuum that has been created, this security vacuum you just mentioned now, by the Sahel's exit?
Well, sincerely, we have made series of calls here to say Nigeria still needs to remain engaged with these countries unofficially. The separation, the departure, and discontinuation of relationships have become very official now. However, as good neighbors before, we need to still maintain those things because like the challenges that Nigerians had recently crossing over to Niger and that country refusing to take Nigerian passports and travel certificates. You see, these are the implications of some of these departures. And Nigeria, still remaining in the chair for now, needs to still do much more behind the scene. At diplomatic levels, behind the scene, we still need to do much more because whatever it is, AES, yes, but beside AES, there is a physical affinity of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, and extending to Burkina Faso that we may not necessarily share a common border, but it is more or less an extension of all that. So we still need to remain engaged with these countries and continue to mount diplomatic pressure somehow, somewhere, to ensure that yes, you have gone, yes, you are in AES, but please take it easy. We are going to do certain things to reverse some of the mistakes done that prompted the exit of these countries. It's very, very important for Nigeria to do that.
Now, just the last question. The impact of the humanitarian impact of this increased regional insecurity. How should Nigeria and ECOWAS address it?
Well, it's a very difficult and delicate thing because you see the northeast region of Nigeria, particularly around the Lake Chad region. Most Nigerians might not probably appreciate the fact that there is a lot of economic activity across the Lake Chad. So much activity, fishing, salt mining, potassium mining, agricultural products, livestock, beside other things. Now, Boko Haram insurgency had disrupted almost all this. And so the humanitarian side of it is that as we speak, the AES countries have gone, yet Nigerian citizens are still in Niger as refugees. It's even a shame that 10, 15, 20 years after, we are unable to repatriate Nigerian refugees across the border from Niger. It's so pathetic that you have hundreds of thousands of refugees that had to flee at the commencement of the Boko Haram insurgency, and they are still there. So you begin to ask the question, what is the Nigerian state actually capable of doing? Can we protect our own? So the humanitarian situation on the ground is such that people are unable to go to farms, people are unable to carry on their businesses. In fact, lamentably enough, because of the lucrative nature of trade and businesses around the Lake Chad region, the security forces have been accused of having taken over the businesses from the civilians, which is real. You go there and you see that some of the military or what have you have become engaged in the conflict. They have been sucked in because there's nothing one can really do. So the security forces, the Nigerian government as an institution needs to really wake up and do much more. Otherwise, the humanitarian crises are still there and growing.
All right, thank you so much, Ambassador Haruna Warkani, for joining us today on Africa Update to talk about issues in East and West Africa. It's been quite a, as always, very, very interesting and educating time with you. That's much we have for you this week on Africa Update. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms for more news, programs, and documentary. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now. I am Chiamaka Nwafor.